Hello and welcome to the fifth and final part of my economic breakdown of the Sorcerer Kingdom of Ainz Ooal, where we will dive into the production and economic importance of each regions. But before we do so, let me thank my Patreons for supporting this channel. And with that said, let's continue with the breakdown. The swampy area of the Lizardman Lakes, while normally problematic for transportation, are bridged by wooden planks. And thus the swamp itself doesn't need the draining, since now travelers can access them easily. And the Lizardmen, and also presumably the Toadmen, can naturally move very well in this terrain. Exports of this region are likely including fish and other lake-related food like sweetwater oysters. And I'm sure the Lizardmen are diversifying their food, especially because Renner's now in charge of the wider government and thus will provide ideas and incentives for better and more economic production methods. And like Irantel and Khan, the United Lizardman Village is also a military outpost, and thus arms, armor and potions might also be in high demand. Next to the Lizardman Lakes, the Forest of Top itself provides the wider Sorcerer Kingdom with lumber, herbs, game. And now that it is pacified, the colder forest might also become a popular tourist attraction during the hot summer days for nearby city dwellers such as in Irantel, and perhaps even for the citizens of Karn. And speaking of it, the city itself is famous for its runecraft weapon production and runecraft weapon research, potion production, potion research, herb collection, presumably herb production via the adjacent fields. And it is also home to a large goblin army, which is also the right position to reinforce Irantel if an army would attack it, falling into the army's flanks and rear, while it is busy breaching Irantel's walls. Khan furthermore received food aid from the wider Sorcerer Kingdom in order to sustain its increased population of goblins and dwarves, but by now it should be able to provide for itself. It also imports materials for maintaining the gear of the goblin army, so basically everything from metal, leather, bowstrings, feathers for arrows, and other things an army of over 8,000 goblins need. Though food for the goblins and food for the wolf riders' mons could presumably be provided by Khan itself. Speaking of food, the dwarf nation receives foodstuff, wine and undead labor, and it is exporting ores, smiths, skilled labor, and supervisors for the undead workers in Irantel, armor and weapons. And maybe it could perhaps starting to produce ice wine, a really sweet wine created by leaving the grapes on the vine during frost periods. The high altitude at the edges of the Elysian Mountains might make this viable, and the dwarves have already a brewery culture established, and were very fond of wine from the wider Sorcerer Kingdom. And they could also use old mine shafts to age the wine. And of course the snowy mountains of Elysia also would make them a potential tourist magnet, especially for winter sport activities. Moving on to the Cuts Plain. This cursed battlefield is entirely unusable for food production, but it provides wild undead for training purposes in the Adventurer Guild. It is also a great battlefield for the undead, since they would have quite literally a home terrain advantage. And the naturally spawning undead could also be taken over by Ainz Ooal in order to resupply his troops. After the rather harsh conquest, much of the economy of the kingdom simply isn't anymore, though it still produces food in the fields, and probably tools, trade goods, and anything else a major city like Ilibera is capable of producing, especially because the entire domain is well managed, due to being under Marquis Raven's personal supervision for decades. The wider former kingdom is capable of gigantic amount of food production, since the fields are of excellent quality, and fish and seafoods were also produced, or rather captured, in coastal cities. And of course the entire region has access to 2 oceans, and therefore could trade with the bigger and wider continental market. And since population is low, it could also be turned into a retreat and holiday area. The Holy Kingdom was also rather hit hard by the last war, but most of its population actually survived it, Though it is currently reliant on food aid and has a greatly damaged economy, it still imports runecraft weapons, and it is home to a spreading cult that worships Ainz Ooal as justice, so it could become the aim of pilgrims that want to personally visit the battlefields of the Sorcerer King, as well as to hear one of Nea's speeches and addresses in person. Religious iconography might also be made here and exported to the wider Sorcerer Kingdom in the future. Other than that, it has still access to the sea and can fish and trade. And it presumably should also trade with the mermen. And despite all of this, the Holy Kingdom has still managed to maintain its fleet to a certain degree, so trade and commerce should return rather easily, though the ongoing campaign of destabilization in order to bring down the sovereign Holy Kingdom, placing the nation fully under Ainz Ooal's control, will most certainly hinder the recovery efforts for a little while longer. And with that said, let's move slightly to the right, to the Abelian Hills, a region that is now stabilized and pacified, rather than it being a war zone. Therefore, for the first time in probably hundreds of years, it has access to the wider market and can be accessed by traders and travelers alike. It presumably produces Speedian webs. It is the starting point of many labor migrants, since the wide variety of different demi-humans, with their unusual bodies and their, relatively speaking, high strength, could provide the wider Sorcerer Kingdom with specialized work, and perhaps the bear folk could even monetize their natural coats. Similarly to how Kashmir goats are camped for the few precious hairs, the rubber-resistant pelts of the bear folk might also have other uses, especially as outer coating for armor, since it is very effective in blunting even the keenest edges of blades. And since the region has a surprising amount of species capable of eating rocks, diamonds and metals, perhaps the region might become a mining hub in the future. And with that said, let's talk about the Elven Kingdom, because let's face it, the Elf King is basically just a dead man walking, and that is, if he's extremely lucky. And the Elf Kingdom therefore might become a new province of the Sorcerer Kingdom rather soon, or a puppet state, or like the Dwarven Kingdom, an ally, after their old king is overthrown and introduced to the 5 worst. Yes, all of them. Given that the Elven Kingdom likely has forest cities, it could become a tourist attraction. I mean, Ainz went there for a holiday, which might boost the location's popularity. Other than that, much like the Forest of Top, it could provide lumber, herbs, game, pets, elven courtesans, magical items and perhaps woodwork, if the elven craftsmen have such traditions. And considering that the Elven Kingdom is in the midst of a losing war against the theocracy, and will be visited by Ainz Ooal, a one-man army and a walking earthquake, it might also require some rebuilding before it becomes a productive part of the Sorcerer Kingdom. And with that said, the series is finally done. I hope you enjoyed it, I most certainly did. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching. And special thanks to Adam J, Al Capone, Andy, Angel of Death, Bedgar Yee, Ben C, Boyzilla, Chrissy, Conquer All, Death is Mercy, Diabetic Centaur, Dystopia, Elika Birchleaf, Thales Catus, Feral Shivan, Forbus Grupulon, Gigafight, Ghost of Epicness, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Black Phoenix Emperor, Hoss, Huster, Jana B, Jason, Kleinator, Chromius, Large, Lifa, Legendarius, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lord Ulbertalane Odell, Luces Ollie, Lexus Fox, Majima, Matt C, Marcos, Michael R, Mr. Shoes, Mindless Wrath, Minnow 13, Mirtis, Nefiria's Potion, O'Kill, Paddy Pantum, Primus 11, Sasuga Einsama, Sebastian, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Surge, Sparkly Unicorn, Sunlight, The Mad Alien, The Orc Warboss Rock Ad Smasher, Ultra Suck, Vash Hawkeye, Zoggo Bane of a Lot, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon under my next video. Over and out.